Ready to dive into a story that really shook up the world of wine.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild one.
This is the Judgment of Paris, and we're gonna go deep on this and
Yeah.
try to unpack how this moment shifted. Like everyone's thinking about wine, even today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, imagine for a sec, like a blind tasting
Okay.
where French wines, which were like the wines,
Right, the top.
yeah, they get totally taken down by California.
It's kind of hard to picture, right? I mean, rewind back to 1976. France was like the undisputed champion. Like their wines were it.
They were the standard, yeah.
So what was it about French winemaking that made them like so revered?
Well, I mean, you're talking centuries of tradition. They had this real connection to their terroirs,
Okay.
which is like the soil, the climate, the grapes, all of that together
Uh-huh.
that makes each wine unique. And then their techniques, passed down for generations, almost like family secrets.
Right, like that's the magic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have places like California, Australia, Chile,
Up and covers.
yeah, trying to find their
And to
footing
break through
in a
Europe.
world dominated by Europe.
Right. And a lot of times they were dismissed, by the European experts,
Yeah.
seen as lacking that history.
Right, that sort of pedigree.
Yeah, but especially in California, there was this like energy, like these winemakers were experimenting,
Really pushing the boundaries.
pushing, yeah, and starting to believe like, hey, we can make wines just as good as France.
And that's where our guy Stephen Spurrier comes in. He's a
Mhm.
British wine merchant living in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't really buy into that whole, California's inferior thing.
Yeah, he was different.
So what set him apart?
Spurrier, he was kind of a rebel.
Okay.
He had this wine shop in Paris, and
Mm.
he was surrounded by French wines,
Yeah.
obviously. But he really felt like Californian wines deserved more attention. He saw the quality, he saw the potential.
He's like, these are good.
Yeah, and he wanted to prove it,
If-
especially to the French.
Oh, okay. So that's why he's like, let's have this showdown.
Exactly.
Blind tasting.
A blind tasting to let the wines speak for themselves.
No labels, no reputation.
It's just pure taste.
And this is all happening in 76, the bicentennial, right?
Yeah.
So Spurrier's got a real sense of timing here. Like, what better way to celebrate American wine than to,
Yeah. Then to maybe take down the French.
pick on the French, yeah.
He was perfect timing. So he sets up this tasting at the Académie du Vin in Paris
Oh, wow.
on May 24th. And picture this, right? You've got all these French judges, like the top wine critics, sommelier,
Like, these are the ultimate palates.
the best of the best.
Wow. Okay, so talk about the pressure. What wines were they actually chose for this? I mean, they must have gone all out.
Oh, yeah, the heavy hitters. For the reds, it was California Cabernet Sauvignon
Okay.
against some of the most legendary Bordeaux you could imagine. We're talking Chateau Mouton Rothschild, Chateau Haut-Brion, Chateau Les Villes Las Cases.
Whoa. Hold on. Those are icons.
Yeah.
That's a lot to go up against.
Yeah.
What about the whites? Was it a similar like David and Goliath kind of situation?
It was. They had California Chardonnay up against like the top white Burgundies.
Oh, okay.
So Domaine de la Vermeille Conti, Merceau Charme, Batard Montrachet,
Okay, so big names.
huge name.
All right. So we've got the stage set, blind tasting, legendary judges,
Mm-hmm.
top wines from both France and California.
Yeah.
This is where I'm like on the edge of my seat.
Yeah.
What happens when those judges start, swirling, sniffing, sipping?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. The results were not what anyone expected.
Okay, come on, don't leave me hanging. Did the California wines actually hold their own?
They didn't just hold their own. They won
What?
in both categories.
You're kidding? California wines beat the French in a blind tasting judged by French experts.
It was a total shock. In the white category, Chateau Montelena Chardonnay, a 1973 vintage, it scored higher than some of the most sought-after Burgundies in the world.
I mean, that's a massive upset. And the Reds, did California pull it off again?
So they did. Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, Cabernet Sauvignon, also 73. It beat some of those legendary Bordeaux we talked about.
Wow. I can only imagine the silence in that room.
Right. I mean, talk about a blow to French pride.
Yeah. So how did the judges react?
Well, you'd think there'd be like immediate acceptance.
Right, because it's blind.
It's blind.
Yeah.
There were whispers, people doubting the results. And the French press, they didn't even want to cover it at first. Like it was a real challenge to their national identity.
Yeah, their wine supremacy. Okay, so we've got the shocking upset, reputation's on the line, national pride kind of wounded. Did the world believe it? And how did this event like really change the wine world? We got to unpack all of this.
Oh, we're just getting started. The Judgment of Paris, it wasn't just a tasting. It was like a seismic event that shook the whole industry. And honestly, its impact is still felt today in how we produce, consume, think about wine, everything.
All right, I am ready for part two. Let's dive into the aftermath of this earthquake in the wine world. So like what happens next? You know, the tasting's over, California's on top. Does the world just like crown them the new wine champs?
Well, not exactly. I mean, it wasn't like instant, but the impact was definitely huge. Think of it like a ripple effect. This news, it didn't just stay in like wine circles.
Right.
It went mainstream. Suddenly, everyone's talking about California wine.
Okay, yeah. So there's buzz, but how does that turn into actual change? Did California wine like become the hot new thing?
Oh yeah, this judgment, it was a total game changer for their reputation. Demand for California wine just exploded.
Really?
Especially for Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay.
Uh-huh.
Napa Valley started seeing tons of investment. And California wines, they were popping up on wine lists all over the world.
Yeah, no longer the underdog.
No, they were serious contenders.
It's amazing how one event could like really shift everything. Did it change how California wines were actually made?
You know, that's an interesting point. I mean, California was already known for being innovative.
Right.
But this Judgment of Paris, it gave them this whole new level of confidence.
Yeah, we can do this.
Yeah, they kept experimenting, refining their techniques, and they really started focusing on making wines that could age well. Like compete with the best of the old world.
So they didn't just like rest on their laurels.
Not at all.
What about outside California? Did other wine regions, did they see this and think like, "Hey, we can challenge the old guard too?"
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It was a wake-up call for the entire wine world.
Yeah.
You know, places like Australia, Chile, New Zealand, South Africa, they saw California's win and they're like, "Wait a minute. We can make world-class wines too."
Right.
It was this realization that like great wine doesn't just come from, these specific regions with centuries of history.
So it kind of democratized the world of wine.
Yeah, it totally did.
Right.
Shifted the focus from like pedigree to quality.
From where it's from to how good it is.
Exactly. And that empowered consumers to explore more, to
Mhm.
try wines from everywhere and decide for themselves what they liked, not just based on a label or a reputation.
Yeah. It opened up like this whole new world.
It really did.
So what about France? Like how did they deal with this? I mean, their top spot was challenged. Did they just like ignore it and keep doing what they were doing?
At first, there was some resistance. I mean, it was hard to swallow, right?
Yeah.
But you got to respect, they didn't just sit back.
So they used this to like reevaluate up their game.
Exactly. The Judgment of Paris was like this catalyst for change in France too. They started modernizing their techniques, even adopting some new world practices while still respecting their traditions.
Oh, okay. So give me an example. What did they start doing differently?
Well, for one, they started making wines that were like a little bit more fruit forward.
Yeah.
Easier to drink.
Right.
So some of the Chardonnay producers, they started using malolactic fermentation.
Okay.
Which was like a technique more common in California. It softens the acidity and makes the wine like rounder, creamier.
Okay.
And then in Bordeaux, some winemakers, they started making their wines with riper fruit flavors, maybe as a response to those bolder Californian Cabernet Sauvignon.
So the Judgment of Paris, it didn't just change how people thought about wine, it actually changed how wine was made, on both sides of the Atlantic.
That's right.
That's pretty wild. So fast forward like to today, like over 40 years later, does the legacy of this Judgment of Paris, does it still matter?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the impact is still felt today. It's not just like a history lesson. It's a story that's still unfolding.
Okay.
It reminds us that the world of wine is always changing.
Yeah.
There's always, room for new things, new discoveries.
I bet there have been like people who've tried to recreate that that original tasting.
You're exactly right. There's been like several follow-up tastings. The big one was for the 30th anniversary in 2006.
Oh, wow.
They got some of those original wines from the 76 tasting
Okay.
and had like a whole new panel of experts judge
did,
them.
did California still hold up?
They did. The results were like a total confirmation. Those Californian wines, they were still amazing, and it showed that they could age beautifully too. It proved that 1976, it wasn't a fluke.
So one blind tasting back in 76, it's still having this like ripple effect. It's shaping how we make wine, drink wine, and even just think about wine, even now. But I'm curious, beyond all that, are there other legacies, like things that aren't as obvious but still important?
That's a really great question. I
Yeah.
mean, the Judgment of Paris, it wasn't just about, who made the best wine that day. It was like a cultural moment. It
Mhm.
challenged these deep-seated ideas about quality, about tradition, even about like who gets to be an expert.
Okay, let's get into that. I think that's like the real heart of this story. Yeah, it's amazing how this event really challenged the idea of like where good wine had to come from. Like it opened up all these
It
possibilities.
really did. It kind of like turned everything upside down. Before this, there was this feeling that if you wanted to know about wine, you had to go to Europe.
Right, like that's where the experts were.
Exactly. But then the tasting happens,
Yeah.
and it shows that, hey, you can make incredible wine anywhere.
Yeah.
And the experts, they might not always be who you think they are.
And that shift, that idea that anyone can appreciate wine, that it's not just for like the elite
Right.
that's
Yeah.
had a lasting impact, right? It's like it gave everyone permission to trust their own tastes,
Mhm.
to explore new wines without feeling intimidated.
Totally. It empowered people to be more adventurous, to choose wines they like, not just the ones with like the fancy labels or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, in turn, has pushed the whole industry to be more diverse,
Yeah.
more innovative.
It's like everyone's playing on a level field now,
Yeah.
right? The winemakers and the people drinking it.
Exactly.
It became less about like knowing the right wines and more about just discovering something new and enjoying it.
And that sense of discovery, that's what's really driven the boom in wine exploration, in the last few decades.
Okay.
Like, we've seen all these new wine regions emerge.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Great varieties that were almost forgotten. They're making a comeback,
Mhm.
and people are willing to experiment, to try new techniques, push the boundaries.
It's like that Judgment of Paris. It sparked this curiosity that's still going strong.
Definitely.
And it's not just the wine itself, right? It's the stories behind it, the people who make it, the culture.
I think that's one of the most amazing things about wine.
Yeah.
It's a way to connect with different places, different traditions,
Mhm.
and the Judgment of Paris reminded us that there's always more to learn, more to try, more to enjoy.
It's like a reminder to be open to everything, with wine, but maybe with life too.
That's a good way to put it.
To be curious, to question things, to challenge what we think we know.
And to never underestimate the power of a good blind tasting.
Right.
Can really open your eyes, make you see things in a whole new way.
So, I guess as we wrap up this deep dive into the Judgment of Paris, I'm just kind of in awe, not just of the event itself,
Mhm.
but of what it's done, how it's still affecting things.
Yeah.
It's a story that reminds us that the world of wine and the world in general is full of surprises.
Definitely.
It encourages us to explore, to ask questions, to always be ready for the unexpected.
And to never stop tasting, to never stop being curious, because who knows what else is out there waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. Cheers to that.